Welcome back, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today with Genna Rivieccio, who is joining us from outside of Paris to talk about the Opiate magazine. Welcome, Genna.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. How's the weather in France today?
It's very fall-like, chilly, gray.
Oh, okay. Nice. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. And to people tuning in, thank you for coming out today. If you have any questions, of course, just go ahead and type them into the chat and I will work them into the conversation with Genna. So let's jump right in. I know the Opiate was founded in 2015. And are you one of the original founders? Have you been with the magazine this whole time?
Yeah, it feels like a long time.
It is a long time. Yeah.
It was, I don't like to talk about that part of my life anymore, but it was started while I was living in Bushwick in 2015.
Okay, Bushwick, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess you don't have to get too personal, but just like, what was the impetus for starting the magazine? How did you meet the other editors? Are the original editors still with the magazine?
Well, I think it started from kind of the usual reason that a lot of people, like everyone says, I'm just gonna, start a literary magazine and I think it's gonna be really easy, but of course it's not. So mine was from a dissatisfaction with what was available and how it works behind the scenes, how it's all very political. And obviously that's gotten a lot worse in the present, I would say. I met the editors like on the scene, I guess, and I was going to Mellow Pages a lot at the time. I don't know if it was like it was a lending library that closed, and there were a lot of readings there, and that's where we did the launch for the magazine.
Interesting. So when you say you didn't like, or things were political, you mean like it felt like you have to know the right people to get published and it's sort of cliquish? Right.
Yeah. Especially in New York.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's very true in New York. So you think it's actually gotten worse over the years?
Yeah. Mainly because of the way things are in terms of like sort of implied censorship, I guess, of what you can and can't say, how you can and can't act in your writing and such, what expectations are.
Yeah. So do you feel like being overseas does that break up the kind of cliquishness a little bit because you're sort of maybe less in touch with yeah.
Every city has the literary clique.
Yeah.
I tend to, at this point, just operate on my computer. So
Yeah. So that's cool. So would you say like the magazine was founded with kind of the sensibility or like the desire to break up that power structure?
Yeah, it's my drop in the bucket contribution.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep it going. I think anyone will tell you that it's hard and that's pretty thankless. And often even the writers can be like, sometimes writers can be demanding and a little bit venomous if you don't like respond right away, or there's like, like they think this is all you're doing, but it is, for many people, it is often like a side thing that's not paid. And so I think there's not consideration for that a lot of the time. In terms of writers kind of pressing you.
Right.
So
has that been one of the main challenges, like feeling like you're beholden to writers that are kind of being a pain in the ass? Or
that's one. And then obviously finding ways to distribute it that are not
Mm.
financially taxing, because it's not profitable. I've always dreamed it could still be like slightly profitable, but
Mm.
and we've actually recently branched out into the opiate books. So we've published a few writers that were in the magazine. We put out some books of theirs. I can show you one. I got one
Oh
here.
yeah, please. Cool.
This is, I don't know how well you can see it,
Mm.
but we just put this one out. It's a second edition of David Leo Rice
Okay.
called The Porn Me Trinity. And some of that was serialized in the magazine, but it has now been, there's some additions to it. And because of what it is about, the pandemic really resonated with this sort of, this guy's just alone in his home in a surveillance state. It's like, watching porn that gets progressively more violent, and he's like deep faked into the porn. It's really good.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what made you want to expand to publish books? Like, if it's already very demanding and challenging to run the magazine, and then you decide, okay, let's add another publishing arm.
I think it's pure masochism, I guess. It's the same thing that applies to literary magazines. I actually think, because I want to carve out a view in the space that I don't feel is there, but also I actually feel books are obviously more respected than literary magazines. Literary magazines are like extremely niche and kind of ephemera at this point. I don't know,
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say that. I probably said a lot of bad things at this point.
No. So tell us, like, how would you describe the vision of the magazine if you're trying to kind of carve out something that you see is sort of lacking in the literary world, or that was lacking when you started the magazine? What are you offering that's different? What kind of vision do you try to put forward with the journal?
I think the most standout thing is, like, I'm not trying to censor people. I just see that a lot in terms of like the same kinds of stories that don't want to be too like controversial or sound like racist, I guess, or anti something, for lack of better terms. I don't know. But then I also fear that, like, when I say that, it's going to bring all the racist people to the yard. But
yeah,
I don't know,
Yeah. No, it's a huge thing. It's something we've just been talking about on my newsletter. I'm curious, actually, is it, maybe this is kind of a dumb question, but is kind of cancel culture as big in France as it is here in the States? Is it an online thing? Is it a social media thing? Is it a cultural thing?
No, it's not as big of a thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will be, because eventually US things do catch on over here.
Right.
But oh, hi, Leanne. Leanne is someone else that we've published. Her book is called Brontosaurus Illustrated.
Oh, nice. Congrats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, like, that's probably why Jerry Lewis was so popular here. I don't know.
Well, I know this is sort of off topic, but I know like French women sort of had it, or French actresses kind of had a different take on Me Too than like American.
Some of them, yeah. But because I know there was that other instance where, like, at the César Awards, I think an actress walked out when Roman Polanski won.
Oh.
I just think it's like, it's variable.
Yeah. So how do you see your role as an editor in navigating all this? Like, do you try to not think about it and just focus on the work and not worry about like who the writer is and if there's maybe like a message behind the work, or just how do you, I imagine it's very tricky to navigate all this when you're producing content.
It's hard not to think about sometimes, but
Yeah.
I think usually like if I'm reading it and I'm enjoying it, I think it means it's a good sign usually. If it's not, I mean, there's always someone who's going to be offended at this point. So I don't know how much you can worry about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was looking at some of your covers. I mean, they're some of them are pretty provocative. And not
My genitalia.
they're interesting and exciting. So it almost seems like in some way you're speaking directly to that, like trying to provoke, at least provoke a response, provoke conversation.
Yeah, I guess like that's what art is supposed to be about, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it's more shocking that anything is still shocking to anyone.
Right.
To me. Like why? At this point, I think we've seen it all.
Yeah.
So I don't know why it's still scandalous, like any of it.
Right. I agree with that. And we have a question here. Jenna, I'm interested how you view / deal with submissions from people who have likely not read anything from your press. And she says, I ran a small press for a while and was continually frustrated and confused by submitters who had no idea what kind of work my press was looking for. And there's a second question, but we'll start with that one.
I haven't been too bothered by that because I don't know, wherever people are getting their referrals, I think like we're pretty open to any genre in fiction and poetry. I do say I'm open to critical pieces, but I don't get a lot of good ones. I myself always contribute a critical piece at the end. But I don't get a lot of good criticism. I think that's definitely a dying medium, and largely because everyone is afraid to speak and nobody wants to hear it when it comes to criticism. So it's like very starving for good criticism. But yeah, sorry, back to the question. I think maybe because we're so general, maybe I don't get bothered if people haven't seemed to have read it, perhaps.
Okay. And question 2, how do you as an editor know when a submission is right for your press? So what are you looking for? And I'll sort of elaborate with a sort of related question of my own, which is something I ask editors, like what kind of response are you looking to have? Because I've known some editors say they're looking to have that like punch in the gut feeling from a piece, and some editors say they want like more of an intellectual kind of stimulating experience. So is there, like, how do you know when a piece is right?
I mean, there is that cliche that it's like you immediately know usually, and it's whatever editors say, it's often, you know, just what their own taste is, what they're gonna like. And it also really helps when things are like spelled correctly and grammatical. Sadly, it's sadly a very big luxury.
Do you feel a lot of
work? Not to get like ageist toward youth, but I don't know if like the written word is going to continue after millennials.
Do you see a lot of submissions with typos?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. No one has said that yet. That seems pretty basic. Like, yeah, make sure you do spell check before submitting.
Yeah. I don't know, but sometimes if it is someone where English is their second language, like I understand that. That's where like I will interpret like a gentle hand in the editing.
Right.
So
we have another follow-up question. What makes a good critical piece? And can you also specify, like, are you looking for criticism, book criticism, film criticism, cultural criticism, anything?
It would be tailored towards books or literature of any kind, but I do like it when people can incorporate like a pop cultural slant. So that's always nice, a nice marriage. Like I like, for instance, like I like book and film contrast pieces. I love those, and those are hard to find because that's something you have to put the time in for. And I understand like these are all speculative pieces that you're not going to get paid for. So I get that a lot of people don't want to waste their time on something so painstaking. Maybe that's part of the reason too.
Yeah. So with the fiction, can you talk about like the kinds of things that you publish? You just said the word speculative. I know you didn't mean it in terms of like sci-fi, but that actually made me wonder if you publish speculative sci-fi. Are you open to any genre, or do you sort of lean more toward like realist fiction?
No, I'm open to anything if it's good. I find it ironic though that like in every editor's note I do, I'm always talking about usually how like I hate men and all this, but like a large part of the fiction writers I've published are men. Like, there's no getting around it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And
go on, go ahead.
Most of the poets have like a larger portion of poets have been women. So I don't know.
Yeah. Can you talk about a recent piece that you accepted? We'll start with a fiction piece and why, like what it was that excited you.
Let's see, what did I just read? What's coming to mind is something called and How Does That Make You Feel? And it's kind of this sardonic piece involving a therapist. So I do like things with like a wry humor. That's something for me.
Can you say more, like what was the process of reading? Like at what point did you know that it was right for the magazine? Like what was it
It's usually like I'll know in the back of my mind while I'm reading, but then if I get to the end and there's like a really good payoff, that's when I'm like, okay, I have to accept this.
Oh, okay. So will you stick with a piece all the way through if you're not sure about it?
No. And I think a lot of people will tell you they won't. If it's not engaging you, I'm probably not going to continue.
Yeah. So humor is something.
And also, since I don't charge for submissions, I don't feel obliged to read the whole thing.
Right. Makes sense. So humor is something that you look for in a piece. Sort of like
I do enjoy it, yes.
Yeah.
But not like too hooey kind. I don't always like a David Sedaris kind of humor.
Oh yeah.
I don't care for that all the time.
Yeah, no, I don't either. So do you ever feel like nothing is right for what you want to publish for an issue? Do you ever get like just not enough submissions, or is it kind of the opposite problem where you get so many submissions and you can't decide?
You can get so many, but it's never gonna be like, oh, there's so many good ones, you know?
Yeah.
It's just not that way.
Yeah. So you don't have a problem like putting the issue together?
No, but it's more of a problem to sift through, the riffraff.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
What are some like common things that people do that would get them rejected? Just like having not the right tone for the magazine, not really knowing the magazine.
I think that tone is important. I think what I find myself averse to, this is just coming to my mind, is when people, they do stories that are in like a country setting, like it's country people. I'm already saying something bad, but I just don't like it when it starts out like, like Cletus was just like a barn or farm setting. I'm not into.
Mhm. Yeah, that's okay. It's not a bad.
You see how it's behind the scenes, it's Wizard of Oz, and it's all
Right,
like subjective based on the
right,
editor.
right. Is that something you weren't like, do you, it seems like that's a kind of preoccupation, is like worrying about saying the wrong thing or.
Yeah, because I find myself saying things that I think are totally fine, and I'll find out someone was like upset by it. So
Yeah,
it's definitely a phobia of mine, and it's something like I will have just said something totally offhanded, and it was no
right,
big deal to me, but yeah.
right, right. Has that actually,
And it's probably part of like imposter syndrome too, right?
yeah, oh, interesting. Interesting. Have you, this is kind of personal, I guess, but have you like been canceled? Like, have you had that experience where people have kind
I
of
haven't been visible enough to be canceled, but I guess if I ever was, I probably would be for sure. Yeah.
for saying you don't like country story?
No, they don't speak to me.
Yeah, yeah. But
To,
I mean, if we actually pick that apart, it's not, I'm sure you're not saying like you don't like country. Like, I'm sure there's more to it, right? You're not
I
saying
think
like,
a country story in the hands of like John Steinbeck would be good. But
yeah,
these days, a farm or country story is not being done well from what I've seen. And I get like a shocking amount of these types of stories set in this environment. I don't know why.
oh, that's interesting. So, but
Yeah.
is there something that's about those country stories? It's not just that they're set in the country, right? It's like they're too simplistic or too moralizing or too folksy or something like that.
I think I'm just seeing like illiterate MAGA people
Mm.
when I see the characters in this story, and
Mm.
that's probably coloring it for me. But I do know that a country story can be done well. I've just
Mm.
not seen one.
So you're seeing like the writer kind of rely on stereotypes in some way.
Yeah, like they're just automatically painting the
Yeah,
characters as like hicks.
right.
I don't, I just don't think that it would be more innovative to just do something a little bit different than that if you are
Yeah,
going to have that
right,
setting.
right, right.
And I hate the story that's set in New York too,
Oh, really?
to the flip side of that.
Right.
Because that's a big cliche too.
Yeah. What sort of cliches do you see like in the New York story? Like young people going to bars and navigating that.
I guess that, yeah. So like you could cite like that cat people story that
Oh
was in
yeah.
the film. That's kind of in that umbrella.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just don't. It can be done, but again, because there's so many people doing it,
Yeah.
like you're just like seeing the same story over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. So sort of like um quippy and snappy and like
But faux.
yeah.
Yeah. And the like messy drunk girl, which I can talk shit about because I was one, but that's hard to execute now because it's very oversaturated.
Yeah. Yeah. The sort of like Lena Dunham, New York type.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but this is not to say like if somebody has a story that's set in the country, or if they have a story where the main character is like a messy drunk woman, it doesn't mean that the story won't work for your magazine, right? It just has to be, it's just like these are
Just
tropes.
calling out cliches that rub me the
Yeah.
wrong way. So if you're gonna like do that kind of setting or story, it has to be like pretty different,
Hmm.
I guess, in
Hmm.
some way.
Yeah. Do you, in the short stories, do you look for like traditional character arcs and setting and stuff like that? Or do you look for things that are a little more kind of stylistically innovative?
Um, I do like a character arc, but I'm not, if the story is doing something else that's maybe not as focused on character arc, but it's still doing something that's, moving or affecting, I'm not gonna like punish it for that.
Yeah.
This is like the other thing is like, this is like kind of a MFA writing approach to reading work, and I also don't like that either.
Can you
So,
can you say more about that? What is like the MFA writing approach?
like, it's very clinical and it has to tick all these little boxes, and it's like totally emotionless. So not about that.
Is your background sort of in that MFA world and you felt like you have to get out of this?
I never went in there.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have, a lot of people that run literary magazines do, but no, I never have. It never appealed to me personally. So
yeah. What is who are the other staff people on the magazine, and what is your editorial process?
So it's Malik, who I call like my connector, because he like, sends people my way. Don't find this submission naturally. And then I have Anton, who is right now helping me a lot more with like the book side of things. So, it's largely me. And Max Talley, who I know you mentioned once, maybe you knew his work or something. He once told me like that I should just have myself on the cover like Oprah, and I was like, no. But like, yeah, the magazine is me and my personality basically.
Oh wow.
He's, my auxiliary men.
Yeah, we actually reprinted one of Max's pieces that had appeared in the Opiate, which is the No Thank You.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
that works. That definitely works. Yeah. See, he has that humor.
Yeah.
He's from New York, but he's like, he came up at the good time in New York. So I think that helps his genuine wit, as opposed to this more manufactured wit that's like the New York way right now.
Yeah. So do you have a connection to other magazines that are sort of like outside the literary establishment? Because it sounds like you're trying to deliberately not be part of like the quote unquote the establishment. So how do you like exist? How do you stay sane? How do you like form?
Who says I am? I don't know if I am.
Well,
I think you're literally like pouring urine all over yourself if you're doing this, like running a magazine. I don't know. I think the only magazine I want to like grasp at as like a parallel is, have you ever heard of Public Illumination magazine?
No.
It's been around for a long time, and I only know about it because Ron Colm, who is someone I've published a few times, and he's also like, he came up in New York in the 80s and 90s. So he told me about it. And nobody really knows the guy who runs it, but he lives somewhere in Italy, but no one knows really who he is. I don't know who he is. But I guess my big goal for the Opiate could be like to get a Wikipedia page for doing it for so long. Maybe that. If anyone wants to start one for me, so
you could create one. Can't you? I actually don't know how.
I can.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if the person can do it. They always know what you're doing. So I think it would have to be someone else. I'm just putting it up there.
Can you, I think we were talking over each other, but you said something like running a literary magazine is like pouring urine all over yourself.
Yes, in terms of
Just
Crazy, your level of crazy.
yeah. Well, tell us more, like, what is it that is so crazy making about?
Because, like nobody's really reading it,
Yeah.
except maybe the contributors, and they're probably reading their own stories and thumbing through the rest. So like for all the time you're putting into it and what's actually being received by it, it is a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
Of, you know, reciprocation, I guess.
Right. Right.
So that's a key element, I would say. Because I think unless you are like the New Yorker or the Paris Review, you're not getting that many eyes on it.
I imagine too, it's hard, like if you don't want to sort of like play the game, so to speak, like if you don't want to go to the conferences and have a table and go to the book fairs and network and sort of.
This is why you're like really catching a unicorn right now, because I don't know and like, yeah, Malik is really valuable to me in that way because he's such a good networker.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, are you like, you don't go on Twitter and like engage and try to kind of jockey for position in the landscape?
I post the work that we put up
Mm-hmm.
on social media, but no, I don't really do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So so Malik is like finding, right? Is it when you say he's out there like bringing people to you, do you mean he's like soliciting work from writers?
I think he's like kind of scout like, and people know he's involved with all these different things and they'll send him work. And if he thinks like work is good for me or if it's good for Paris Lit Up, he'll like pass it along.
Yeah.
So it's helpful.
Yeah. It's a really interesting position. It reminds me, there's another magazine called Avoid. Do you know that one? It's based in London. I did an email exchange interview with the editor, but I mean, it's hard to be kind of like an outsider magazine and then also want readers, right? Like, and I'm sure actually, I think more people than not are kind of aligned with your perspective. I think people are really fed up with the gatekeeping and the sort of like the political environment and like everybody competing for attention and clicks and all this stuff. And I think more people than not, I think actually are like sympathetic to to your position and like kind of identify with your frustrations. But how do you find those people and how do you kind of connect to an audience without going into the fray? Seems like a really challenging.
I mean, I don't know. That's been probably why I do keep going on with the magazine is because I have made a lot of connections with it. Like I have bonded with a lot of the writers and I do think, they make me feel less alone about what I'm doing because I see that a lot of them are doing this for pure of heart reasons. And I think that's hard to find in any literary production at this moment because everyone wants to monetize it, expecting like some kind of big payday, but that's just probably not going to happen if you're not working with one of the big five. So
either, I mean, I think either monetize the magazine or monetize themselves in some way. There are a lot of editors, wonderful editors who are doing it purely for like noble reasons, like who just want to, put out great literature. But I think also there are editors, I mean, understandably, right? Because it's so competitive. So the editors sort of want to use the magazine in some way to get leverage in this environment. Which I mean, it makes.
Eventually though people stop or if they're not getting something out of it, that's why I do feel like I stand out in this way because I've continued to do this. Like I think eventually someone would have stopped in my position if they weren't like a grant or some kind of financial compensation.
Do you do it all out of pocket?
I used to, but then I went to the print on demand route because obviously that was another pouring urine on yourself thing, is paying out of pocket.
Right.
And that's the other thing that sometimes contributors will get miffed, because I no longer offer free copies, even though I would love to do that, obviously. But I am working on a new way to distribute that will hopefully allow me to at least give free contributor copies again, because
Mm.
it bothers me too that I can't, like, it's like one little thing I could do for them since I
Yeah.
can't. So
Do you feel an obligation to the contributors to try to grow the readership and network more sort of like on their behalf? Or is it just like, this is what the magazine is, you gotta kind of sell it yourself if you know what you're getting into when you contribute?
yeah, I think it's both, but mostly the latter.
Hmm.
But I think that people do contribute because they see something in the magazine that's like anti-establishment maybe, and that
Hmm.
appeals to them.
Hmm. Yeah. So why do you keep doing it? And maybe this is something you ask yourself sort of every day. I know for a while I ran the Review, which is like a site, and I reviewed literary magazines and interviewed editors and a lot of stuff like that. And that was a question I also asked myself often. It's like, why am I doing this? Because there's so much work that is
Mhm.
not creative. And that's
Yeah,
something I think people don't realize, that there's so much like back end work and maintaining the site and kind of um, just logistical things that do not feed your creative soul in any way whatsoever. But you know that you like the product, you like what you're putting out into the world, but it's a lot of time and sometimes costly. So I guess for you, like what kind of keeps you at it?
I have to be this voice in the void, I guess. It's like a compulsion. I don't know. I have to do it.
Yeah.
And it is like, it does, I know like people with kids don't like the analogy, but it is like giving birth every time, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, that's okay. I have a kid and I accept that as a fair analogy. I mean, it is. You're like, if you're running a business or you're kind of putting, something, it's not obviously the exact same thing as having a kid, but it's your baby to some
It's
degree.
your blood, sweat, and tears. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, it does sound challenging, right? Because you're trying to sort of like be in a lane that is anti-establishment and get visibility in some way from
right.
the
It's a,
establishment.
it's a dichotomy.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
yeah.
I just need, it's like and Never Been Kissed. When David Arquette tells Drew Barrymore, you just need one cool person to like you. So like, let me find one person in the establishment.
Right, right.
I don't know, sending out a SOS.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And then also, but I mean, it's interesting, right? Because it's also like simultaneously rejecting that whole idea that you need
Right.
everything.
It's a total Ouroboros. It really is.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm not sure what the solution is, because you think the solution is being anti-establishment, but you always find that you have to go back to it
right,
in some way, one way or the other,
right.
unless you want to, you know, I don't know, go off the grid or something and totally reject it, like
Mhm.
genuinely, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
So
It seems like, I mean, there are other magazines. It seems like that would be a good avenue, would be to sort of like form allegiances with other similar magazines, but maybe that's hard. Like if you're all loners
right,
on
yeah,
the fringe, how do you identify other loners to
We could
unite.
at least do a meetup, a collective.
Yeah, in some way, like a kind of, I mean, I know like they're in the States, you're probably familiar with, there's AWP, which is like the big writing conference, gets bigger and bigger every year. And I think
Yeah.
one year there were like 18,000 writers. And then in response to that, there's been another conference, I think called No AWP, or like, I forget, something to that effect. It was like the anti-AWP.
Yeah. Uh-huh. It's
But I
all,
mean, it's like, how do you find the time to also do that and invest in that and sort of build those connections?
yeah, I don't know. There was that's the other thing about like art that's out there, is that it is all coming from a very middle class perspective, because you have to have some kind of money to be doing it and participating in this.
Hmm.
So that's also another problem.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Well, are there things you would want to see more of in your submissions? Humor, criticism?
I would love to see more criticism that's good.
Yeah,
A lot of people in their criticism, for some reason, still speak in the first person, which I hate. That's not.
interesting. Yeah. So you don't want, because some magazines I think do want that, like the criticism that sort of ties in.
Oh, that's like an essay, like a
Yeah,
personal essay.
yeah. You want
Criticism,
like real, like,
I want that Susan Sontag shit.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Respect for Susan Sontag's
Mhm.
level of criticism.
Yeah, yeah. Um, okay, so more kind of Susan Sontag as criticism and fiction. Would it be safe to say like fiction beyond kind of
I
the
just want to see like more fiction in general, because
okay.
I think a lot of editors would say it's always like a glut of poetry.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. We didn't really talk about the poetry, but it sounds like it's the same for what you're looking for in poetry is sort of similar to what you're looking for in fiction, like something
I
outside the mainstream.
yeah. Poetry is all over the map in general, but
Mhm.
that's something that's definitely more like, if this is speaking to me, then yes,
Mhm.
I want to publish it.
Yeah.
That's a way more guttural or reaction that you can have to poetry than fiction, I would say.
Okay.
Because fiction, there's other aspects to consider
Mhm.
as opposed to just a feeling.
Yeah. So are you open to volunteers? I actually have a feeling that there are a lot of people who read my newsletter who might resonate with your vision and your experience here. If they're excited, they want to connect with you, is there a way for them to get more involved with the magazine? Are you looking for help?
Yeah, I would love help if anyone wants to. Just email at the opiate magazine at
Hmm.
gmail.com,
Hmm.
and that's a way to connect.
Okay, cool. And when are you open for submissions?
It's year round. I was doing it through Duosoma,
Right, I saw
but
that.
I've closed that because I had too many to go through and I was getting too overwhelming.
Hmm.
So I'm still going through the Duosoma
Hmm.
things, but you can still email me at the address if you do have a
Okay.
submission. But
Oh, okay.
Duosoma, like, I have responded to some people that submitted like a year ago, like,
Mhm.
and they get real upset if it's been that long, and it's like,
Oh.
cut me a break, man.
So it's only you reading submissions, so people should know that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
know that it's a
yeah.
skeleton crew.
Covered in urine. Yeah.
Yes. How October appropriate.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, I think there are people out there who will want to sort of connect with what you're doing and certainly submit work your way. And it sounds like, you know, you're doing what you can to kind of stay true to yourself, which is not easy in this
It's
environment.
not. It's really not. But yeah, I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really like, I think that's a pretty great thing to be trying to do. It's definitely not easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm here to show you it can be done. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hard though it may seem, yeah.
You too can be a success like me.
Well, thank you so much, Genna, for taking the time. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to reach out to you and be in touch and send work your way. And just to clarify, you're not open for submissions on Duosoma, but people can submit to you through email.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. This was
Thank you.
fun.
Yes. Thanks again.